Hey everybody, Darren coming back to you with another video regarding some information that might be helpful for you to be able to figure out how to do repairs on your vehicles, especially if you get an engine light or you may have some type of like suspension issues going on, possibly clunking noises, things of that nature. I'm not a mechanic and the reason I thought this video would be helpful, like the first one seemed to have been a little helpful. There's some views on there, so I appreciate everyone that watched that hood latch repair video I did. To make a long story short is my daughter's car died in the middle of driving home. Wouldn't start. I was able to get it finally to crank over, barely, and run down the street till I was able to get it home. At that point, it was at a total guess at this stage. I didn't have any information. I didn't have some of the correct tools to be able to diagnose it and to figure out what had happened. I was thinking common things, you know, maybe battery, this, that, and the other from a non-mechanic perspective, but I went on a whole different journey trying to figure this out. So what went from a hood latch eventually turned into a multitude of parts. And it was for the good. The car has 150,000 miles on it. So the car needed a bunch of different things, from the timing to the suspension to the coils, spark plugs, some sensors, some belts, some control arms, some air filters, different things. But the fact of the matter is the car was getting old, so it was going to eventually need to be done. And the fact that it's an 03 Honda Civic EX and that I can get the parts fairly cheap on Amazon for the most part. I've been finding everything on Amazon. I did find a sensor or two on eBay that was a little bit cheaper. I'm not using all OEM parts at all. Not all of us can afford to pay $300 per part, especially for like struts and things of that nature. So I figured, you know, for the life I might get out of this car, being that it had 150,000, I would just get some more inexpensive parts that were probably not as efficient as the OEM parts, but it would get my daughter by while she was finishing high school. So with that being said, I'll show you some of the things that I've done, and I'll show you some of the old parts. I won't relay on any specific part for too long so I don't bore you. I am going to go over everything from some control arms and bushings, sway arm bushings, simple air filter, transmission mounts, water pump, thermostat, control arms, lower ball joints, struts, end links, your sway bar end links, and spark plugs, and a few other sensors and things. So if you have the time, this may not specifically be information that directs you into the issue you're having with your particular car make or model you have, but in general, most cars all have the same type of parts. They may look a little different, but they take the same types of mechanical knowledge I feel like I'm getting because I have no experience as a mechanic except for watching YouTube. I was able to watch YouTube, and I was able to watch another video. In fact, I watched multitudes of videos that were able to help me to figure out what I needed to do and what direction I should go with this, because otherwise you're going to a mechanic, and one of these particular parts I'm going to go over with you could cost hundreds of dollars to get fixed through a mechanic. If you want to be able to just work on your car and avoid some overly expensive costs. There is going to be things though that we can't do. We just don't have all the right tools, and even YouTube sometimes doesn't have all the knowledge you would need. So there's going to be times where you're going to go to a mechanic regardless, and I'll talk about that because I did have to take my daughter's car in to get one thing done that I attempted to do. Didn't work out, but for the most part it's back in order and the car's running good. So with that being said, let's check out these parts. Okay, so you can see I have a whole table full of parts, and I also have the struts that I took off of her car. I did take all 4 of these struts off, the front and the back. I got the easy, I don't know what they're called. You know, correct me if I'm wrong if someone hears me name a part that isn't specifically called that. I tend to just do that because I'm not going to stop the video to go research something that you guys probably get the drift. So let's check out some of the parts, and I'll start with what I first did. When my daughter's car broke down, I watched some videos specifically to the car and tried to pick up on some information that would lead me in the direction to figure out where to go. So with that being said, the timing was the first thing that we found that could cause the symptoms that this car was having after it died. With that guess that we took after watching some of those videos, we were right. So here's some of the parts that are involved with the timing, and there's also a water pump. For this specific car, when you go down and you're doing the timing, there's a few other components that you probably want to change out while you're down there because it's kind of a lengthy job to get into that area and to remove some of the parts that you're going to have to remove. So here's the timing belt. I did find that the timing belt had some little cuts in it, and I don't know if you can see it or not. It's probably not gonna work too great, but there it is. There's some cuts in that. The reason this belt had some cuts was because the timing belt spring, which goes on the tensioner pulley, broke, and you can see the end of that. Well, this spring was just laying in the compartment behind the timing cover, and you can see this tension pulley to keep the belt tight is just, it's wasted. It doesn't even, it just kind of moves and spins around. So we found that that was probably going to be the first indication of what was going wrong with our car. So I went on to Amazon, and I'm going to talk about Amazon later. I'm not being promoted by Amazon. I'm not getting paid. In fact, my channel's not even monetized. Hopefully I can get to that point with enough views, and if I do, then it'll motivate me to do some more videos. And just for the record, this channel isn't specifically a mechanic channel. It's Review It TV, and the reason I named it that is because it can apply to any situation or subject in life that you may want to cover. And as I find things useful in life, I tend to like to film them. I like doing editing, so I'll be able to show you guys some other things. You know, check out my channel. You'll see some vacation videos and some other stuff too. But anyways, so that was the first problem. So I did go to Amazon and I ordered a timing belt kit. Now with a timing belt kit, which is probably smart depending on your car and what type of components are down there, came with a new tensioner pulley, a new belt, and it came with a new water pump. This water pump actually looked really good. I mean, I can't tell if it was going out or not. I mean, there's some calcium buildup in there. Whatever that corrosion is from the antifreeze, you can see that the seal's a little bit gunked up. But so it came with that, and it was, I think, $54 for everything. The spring I had to get separate, and I had to get this on eBay because people were trying to charge ridiculous amounts of shipping for these on other websites. So anyways, timing was the first thing we did. After doing the timing, when inspecting the car, I found some other things that made sense to do. Being as how I hadn't done anything to this car since I purchased it for my daughter, there was quite a few things that seemed like they were neglected. And it wasn't specifically probably because the person was just being lazy, it's just because they thought, well, as long as I change the oil and the windshield wiper fluid, we're good to go. You know, and they took care of the inside of the car immaculately and the outside, but as far as the engine and the suspension goes, they neglected some parts. So no blaming them or ragging them, but I did find some other things that had to be done. And a couple of these things that we had to also do was the spark plugs and the coils. Like I said, I won't drag this out, but as you can see, some of these coils are real brown and nasty and gunked up. You can tell they've been aged. They've been sitting in this car for a while, so I could tell just by looking at them and on the insides that they've gotten somewhere. They've been cooking for a minute. The other thing was the spark plug. And sorry if I'm not looking directly at the lens. I'm just focusing to make sure I'm not zooming in or getting a blurry view. But you can see this spark plug was pretty dirty, gunked up, wasted. And I don't know if the gap, if that happened when I dropped the spark plug, probably, but the gap seems a little off on this too. So as you can see, it's just nasty around the whole thing, and it's just brown. And looking at some of the tips down here, this little tip, they were burnt down pretty bad, so it was a good idea to replace. So that's another thing you might want to check. I don't know if your car has coils or it has spark plugs, wires, and a distributing cap, but this car has the coils, so they're pretty easy. You just put the spark plug in, you drop them down. This actually comes down over your spark plug like that. And then you take your coil and you plug in the plugs, and it's as simple as that. So did those. So I'll go back to the timing real quick. In the timing compartment, it wasn't just the timing belt and the water pump and the tensioner pulley and the spring. There's also a couple sensors down there that are really key, and I'm not gonna go over what they do or how they work. There's a lot of videos and some links I'm gonna put in the description of this video that helps me to come up with ideas and theories on what might be going on and how to test some of these things. But I had a camshaft sensor, which is down there in the timing compartment right in between the camshaft wheel. It's a little bit of a pain to get to on this particular car. And I also did a crank shaft sensor as well, and this isn't the crankshaft sensor. I have that guy somewhere, but look it up for your car. Crankshaft sensor, camshaft if you're doing the timing. It makes sense to get all those components done at once. The camshaft and the crankshaft and the timing all seem to work together. And I was having a pretty big issue after doing the timing regarding my map sensor, and I'll explain to you real quick why. After doing the timing, and getting everything nice and put back together. We even put the camshaft or the cam wheel seal in there to stop any oil leaks, in the crank wheel down at the bottom behind the harmonic balancer. There's 2 seals you might want to do while you're down there too, so you don't have oil leaks. After putting everything back together, I don't know if it was because we were looking down at the timing marks or what, but somehow we didn't get it on timing enough for it to be running correctly. It did get the car started, so once we went to crank the car and it turned right on, we were convinced, hey, we did the timing. Timing's really touchy. It has to be really perfect and specific, and everything has to be in order, and the belt has to have that correct tension on it, or you'll slip teeth and your timing will go out. What it did to me is it turned on the engine light, P1129, if I'm specifically right about that, to the 03 Honda Civic was the map sensor indication that there was an issue that the map sensor was picking up. And being not a mechanic, I did the first thing that most people probably do, is I jumped on the parts cannon. And there's another guy who did a video who explained about not dumping parts into your car, and he used the term parts cannon, which was a pretty good analogy when it comes to non-educated people who want to try doing mechanics. I'm not educated on mechanics, I just grabbed my experience. But I started to want to dive in and start just buying sensors and stuff, saying, oh, it's just got to be the sensor. But he had a valid point. It could be the sensor's malfunctioning itself. It could be something in the wiring harness, or it could be that the timing's off, so the valves aren't shutting all the way, causing more compression, and that map sensor was picking up on that. And that's exactly what happened with my car. After multitudes of changing out other things and trying to mess with it, it ended up being that the timing just wasn't put into place right. It wasn't timed right. So the valves weren't shutting, causing compression, causing the map sensor light to turn on. It caused the car to go into limp mode, and then it's shifting horribly and everything else. And it just turned into a nightmare. So with that being said, pay attention, do a little bit of research, and don't do the parts cannon, because I learned the hard way and it is what it is. So it was that timing once again. So I changed this, and I changed all the crankshaft, the camshaft sensors, and before finally taking it in the mechanic shop, none of that worked. But long story short, got it fixed and adjusted. So after that, I started digging some more. I wanted to find out what other things on this car may need some adjusting, because I didn't want to lease a new car or finance a new car. This one, with the parts being so readily available on Amazon, with 2-day shipping with Amazon Prime, you can't beat that. And the return process, if you don't happen to use it or something's wrong, is so easy. In fact, they deposit the money at the minute you drop the package off, but that's another story. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the other parts that I got into. Like I was saying, after fixing the timing, I started hearing clunking going on with the suspension. So I started doing some investigating, jacked the car, popped the tires off, started looking at things that I really didn't know a whole lot about. I knew about CV joints, I know about the struts. They're 2 big components that are pretty simple to understand and see right when you're looking out behind the tire in the wheel well compartment. But I wasn't keen on sway bar end lengths and bushings, and I knew about ball joints, but I wasn't, I've never changed them, and I didn't even have the tool to change them. But after taking self-initiative and watching some great YouTube videos, like I said, they'll be in the description box below, really helped me take my own journey and get this car repaired and save me hundreds, possibly thousands, maybe a couple thousand with everything I've done. I don't know. Any mechanics that are watching this video and seeing the parts I'm showing you will probably say to yourself, oh, that would have been $300 if we would have done that. That would have been $800. That would have been $900 for the timing. Well, I spent $1,200 for all these parts and put in my own labor with my own tools. So the next thing I was looking at on the suspension, because of the clunking I was hearing, was bushings. Bushings are a big thing that dries out on these vehicles, especially in this state. In New Mexico, we have this dry desert weather. So any types of rubber hoses on compressors, things, they all dry out and crack. It's just notorious for happening here. So what I did is I went and I researched on Amazon some new control arms. And instead of trying to pull these off and then take the bushings out, I just went ahead and brought the whole control arm. You can see that there's cracks going into this. There's really tiny cracks all over it in general. So this guy was getting ready to go out or to start causing some issues. If you get a chance, go into your car with a flashlight and just look in these little joints right here. See if I can get to focus. You can see little cracks forming down there. So if that happens, you're gonna start feeling clunking eventually. And nothing more annoying than driving around and hearing clunk on the little tiny cracks in the road. Clunk. It's just, ugh. So the other thing I did was I did the end links, and I'll show you these guys on this car. You can see that on these end links, they're toasted. The boots are all wasted. And then of course, the joint itself is just on some of these, I could almost flop them around, and you can see how the boots have lifted up. The little knuckle or joint in there is wasted. So these sway bar end links were something that definitely needed to be done, and I don't regret doing it. So people might say, hey, you're firing parts with a parts cannon, but I don't think so, because these ones were toasted. So we did those. We also did, and those were the rear ones I showed you. We did the front ones as well. They're a little bit smaller, but the same thing. They were wasted. They had the boots tearing. The joints are really messed up. Take a good look at those, because these are good ideas of things that may be happening on your car. And if you're not familiar with them, then hey, take a good look, go down there. If you start seeing these boots all crushed and dried out, and it's hard to tell with these, I mean, you can loosen the nut a little bit and try to wobble it and see if you get that real loose joint wobble, then you'll know that these are pretty much wasted. Generally, when you see the boots like that, all the dirt and everything has gotten into these guys anyways and ruined them, so it's just a good idea to replace them. And to get a whole kit for less than $100 for both passenger and driver side on Amazon, it was a no-brainer. Granted, they're not OEM parts, but they'll give me enough time on this vehicle to get her through school so she can get a job and possibly finance a newer car and not have to worry about all this. That was my idea. The other thing that we did on this, real quick, start speeding this up a little bit, because I want to show you a few other things, is the lower ball joints. And here's a good example why. If I can get that to zoom right, you can see that big tear in there, and you can see I don't even have to really move that guy. It's just wasted. This is a new one, and let me show you what I did wrong. This can be a very valuable lesson for someone that's putting some ball joints in for the first time. If you get and I'll show you guys that you need to get the tool, and probably the best place is like Harbor Freight or online. You can get it for less than $100, but it presses these ball joints out. And this boot was the original boot to go on this new ball joint. Well, we kind of put it in lopsided, and when we were compressing it in, that boot tore away, and this little wire that keeps the boot clamped onto the ball joint got tweaked, and it just ruined everything and completely tore the whole boot up. So even though I got a good new ball joint, I got a bad boot. So eventually this ball joint would get wasted pretty quick because the dirt and everything would attack it. So I might use it. Okay, so tie rod ends. It's like the upper ball joints, I guess you could call these. This one's new. I threw the old ones away. I couldn't find them to show you guys. Same thing though, these boots tear, and then the joint's really loose. So when it's to the bracket on your strut, it can get that clunking when you're hitting like this if these are wasted too. When you put these ones on, you're gonna have to get an alignment done, because you have to remove the nut. And if you don't get your alignment straight when you're tightening up, then the alignment job will fix that for you. So those two on both sides is what I did. Those were all wasted. So we've covered the control arms, we've covered the sway bar links, front and back, and the lower ball joints. We've covered the timing. We've covered the coils, the spark plugs, the struts. I want to show you guys. Rear struts. They've been sitting in the dirt for a little while since I changed them. Generally, you'll get oil leaking down out of the seals up here. I'm not getting that on either of these, but I wanted to change it because they look like they've been in the car for a minute. I don't know if these are the OEMs. I'll have to look up the serial numbers on it to find out. These ones are those easy strut kits. You don't have to compress the strut out of the spring. You can buy this whole kit. You basically remove your 3 bolts on top, and then you're gonna remove these 2 bolts and pop it out, stick the new one in there, put your bolts back in. There's a little more to it than that, but that's just about how easy it is to do these. So if you can get this whole complete kit, if you can get the OEM and afford it, fine. But if not, these are pretty good. I got all 4 of these for, I think, $240 on Amazon. And that's front and back. Another thing that I did, and we're almost there, guys. This video won't be as long as I thought, was the transmission mount. And the reason I switched this transmission mount is, and let's see if we can get this, may not have enough lighting, but inside here in that little crack down there, that little area, that's where one of the cracks had formed on this guy. And then if you look here, it started cracking all up in the front right here. Keep an eye on these mounts though, guys, just to let you know. This particular transmission mount has this like little equalizer that sits right on the top of this guy, just like that. And a lot of the ones that they're selling aftermarket don't have that equalizer, and it can cause some trembling or some vibrations in your motor if you don't get the one with this little equalizer. So if you have a specific transmission mount for whatever vehicle vehicle it is, make sure that you get the exact same thing. If it has an equalizer mount, don't deny it. Don't get a cheaper one because it's $10 cheaper. Get the right one or you're gonna have some problems. I read some reviews from some people that said that they had bought one that was just like this and didn't have the equalizer because it still said it fit their car, and they put it on and now they're getting vibrations. So important thing that I was able to avoid, so I didn't have to go through that. I put this on, you know, just jacked up the car, put it on jacks, put a jack with a wood block under the oil pan just to hold the engine up while I removed the bolts. And I had to take out an air box and a few other components to get to this, but it wasn't bad. For my first transmission mount, it was pretty easy. So I'm gonna work on the other mounts later, but this one was the one that I could see that visibly had cracks and it looked like it was drying out more than the others, so I started with this one. One other thing, guys, to check along with your coils and your spark plugs is an air filter. This one, you can tell it's had its day. It's dirty. On the back side, it's a little cleaner, but you don't want to have it getting that wasted. Your car depends on it. The more clogged it is, the less your car will breathe, the more issues you'll have. It's just good to have a clean air filter in there to get rid of debris, leaves, and dirt. And you can see this old one, it started falling apart. The plastic gasket was coming off and it was getting heated up and distorted, so it wasn't even sealing right. So did that too. So those are all the parts that I did so far on this car. I still have a slight clinking, or clunking I should say, up front. I don't know exactly what it is. Being that I've changed all the suspension parts on the front, I didn't do the control arms on the rear because they're still good, and the clunking sound that I had in the rear is gone from doing the bushings. And speaking of bushings, let me show you these guys because there is a couple more things here I did. I got rid of the sway bar bushings. And a good thing to know on these guys is sometimes when you get them, and you can see that's where the old grease was that they put under the little bracket that holds these bushings in place. But these bushings go on your sway bar under the front and the rear. And they just sit flat up against the bottom of your car, and the sway bar goes through the centers of them from one wheel over to the other back wheel. And sometimes this area right here gets thin, or the diameter of the hole gets stretched, and you can't see it with the naked eye. Use a caliper, one of those little metal calipers. I have one, I'll show it to you guys later, to measure the hole. These were definitely stretched as opposed to the new ones, so they were inexpensive, 10 bucks for a set. I did the front and back, less than 20 bucks. I did check the holes with the measuring caliper, and I did see that they were stretched. So these are probably the originals as well. I know you can't see my face the whole time I'm talking, but hey, you're getting the point. But this is your camshaft sensor. Actually, sorry, this is your, yeah, camshaft, sorry. Camshaft, 1 bolt, goes right in there, the cam, in between the cam wheel. It's kind of hard to get to. This is your crankshaft sensor, and this one's still new. I accidentally ordered 2 of them, so I just kept one for later. Being that they're not OEM, I wanted to see how long they last, and if one goes out, I have a spare. And then the airflow, the mass airflow, temperature sensor. So I replaced all 3 of these guys, and the map sensor. Let me show you the map sensor too. The map sensor is the sensor that I thought was giving me problems regarding the engine light. And this little guy right here. If I can let that zoom in a little bit. I was trying to focus on my face. This is the guy that I went to start to chase parts with because it kept coming on even though I was changing out other things and my voltage in the harness was good. I actually didn't test the sensor because I didn't have like a compression, one of those little hand squeezing air compression tools to be able to put in the bottom to get the right reading off of this, so I just replaced it. I figured it isn't gonna hurt. If you have some extra money to dump into a car and you don't mind throwing a few extra parts whether they need it or not, then I guess you won't feel bad after you do that. And that's what I did, so. I figured what the heck, it's my daughter's car. My daughter's safety is important. I figured with her driving the car and the car having 150,000 miles and being able to just understand that you can tell by the appearance of the vehicle and the interior what type of owner probably this was. And I was told what the owner was. There was a couple old ladies that were stewardess for the airport. So they only use it to go back and forth, but they had it from day one, the car brand new. So they kept up with their servicing, but they didn't do anything other than the servicing. So I think when the parts started to show signs of clunking and the timing, they just abandoned the car and went and got another one. So I put $1,200 into it in parts. And the reason I say $1,200 is I'm including what I had to pay the mechanic too to get the timing correct because we were still a tooth or 2 off, he said. Okay guys, so I've showed you some parts and I've showed you what my mission was. Just a quick recap. Daughter's car broke down, watched YouTube videos, got my YouTube degree in mechanics, was able to find some really useful YouTubers, videos and information to motivate myself to be a self-thinker and to not be discouraged and to be able to just go in there and dig in and figure things out. I saved myself many hours in labor and my daughter's using her car and it's working good. Besides that little clunk in the front, which is probably another set of bushings or could be a possible engine mount. It could be the subframe bushings, I don't know. But I'm having fun with this and I'm learning and I'm saving myself money. I wanted to show you guys some things on Amazon. Just a quick idea about getting your parts versus going to some of these auto stores, you know, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Napa, etc., etc. A lot of these guys are charging 3 and 4 times the amount of money that the actual item is worth, or the part I should say, and they're not even OEM parts either. They're just aftermarket parts. So, I mean, I understand they gotta make their money, but some of us can't afford to take our cars into mechanics for expenses like that, or even afford to pay hundreds of dollars for one part that you could probably get for a fraction of the cost on Amazon. And I keep saying Amazon because I'm a big Prime user. I order a lot of stuff on Amazon. I enjoy the benefits of being able to watch Amazon Prime videos and movies. It's similar to Netflix, Amazon Music, and 2nd-day shipping on everything. I mean, I get my parts like that at a fraction of the cost. And I've even had to return a couple of things that I didn't end up using. And man, is the returning on Amazon so smooth. So take my word for it. Check on Amazon for your parts if you're not interested in OEM parts. Let me show you an example. Upon buying all the parts from my daughter's car, as you can see, Amazon, you know, smiley little Amazon. I also brought a fuel pump. Now, this fuel pump's brand new. As you can see in the box, everything hasn't even been touched yet. It was one of my theories when I was shooting the parts can. Sorry, guy, if I stole your saying, but I figured maybe her fuel pump was just going out and the map sensor was, I don't know, somehow miraculously rating compression because of fuel and things that didn't make sense. But you know, you tend to think of, not being a mechanic, to make your brain just feel more comfortable about the fact you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and that you're probably going to be playing a lot of parts for stuff that aren't needed on your car because you just don't have the knowledge. So point being, check YouTube. If you start with Google by just Googling the subject that you're interested in finding, chances are it's going to relink you over to YouTube, because I think they're sister and brother companies anyway, so they work together to be able to show you videos that are in relevance to the subject matter you're browsing for. So check that out. Check out Amazon, check out the parts. Other people are gonna say don't, get OEM. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, their own experiences. So far, with all the parts that I've put on this car aftermarket, it's running great for now. Will it last 100,000 more miles? Maybe not, but I'm okay with that because I know how to replace them again, and I don't mind gaining the experience. So this video may be a lot of talking after all, but it could be useful for helping you choose a direction, because for those of you that aren't mechanics, I'm telling you right now, everything I'm showing you is just what I did by myself. I just went out, started watching videos, buying some tools, buying some parts, and every once in a while I might have a friend come give me an extra hand, you know, if it's a difficult repair, but I've gotten a lot done. We'll get back to you guys here in a minute. I'm gonna go ahead and jack up the car a little bit and show you some of the components under the wheel and just give you a kind of a rough look at the top of the engine and some of the parts that I had to switch out there. And then we'll get to a closing of the video, and then we'll come up with some other videos here in the future. So let me get back to you in just a sec. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jack up the car. I'm going to get it on some jack stands. It's very important that you guys use jack stands. Use jack stands on both sides of the car, and don't take the jack stands for granted, thinking that these are just gonna be fail-proof and that you're fine under the car, especially if you're by yourself and you're working on the car and there's no one around to find you being squished by the car for hours. May not be a good ending. So what I do is that after I jack up the car and I put the jack stands under, I also put a second source of support. I use these big railroad tie blocks and another block to put under the frame on either side along with the jack stands. Then I put the jack back under the car and lightly keep it under the car as well. That basically ensures me that chances are of getting squashed are little to none. But also, don't forget to put chocks behind your tires so your car doesn't roll forward or backward, because all this may be irrelevant. If your car rolls and all that falls out from under your car, it's gonna squash you anyways. Let's go ahead and jack the car up. Make sure you jack your vehicle up in the proper area. Don't just start putting your jack up under control arms and things that you can bend. There's specific areas that are marked on most vehicles that are points of where you're going to be jacking your vehicle up. If you miss that, you could ruin something, or you could drop the jack in the car, and you don't want to do that. Okay. Sometimes it helps if you guys have an impact gun. Some people may not be familiar with an impact gun, but it's usually used by an air compressor. An impact gun that takes sockets makes things easier when you're taking off lug nuts or whatnot on your vehicle. Put them on my carpet. Take the tire off. And I'm gonna give you guys a close-up view of some of the parts I've taken off and replaced so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's look at some of these parts. As you can see here, this is the strut. I replaced that. It was the bolts I was showing you on top, and then these two big bolts right here. These two bolts are what's going to release that strut. You do need to take your brake caliper off and a few other components here. This isn't a strut video, so I'm not going to get deep into it. The other thing that we're having an issue with here was the boots. And this is the new control arm, and those are the new boots. So we have no cracks, and even the new control arms look good. We didn't tear them already. Shouldn't have. If you look down here, we did the sway bar and links and the sway bar bushings. As you can see, if I can get a good view here, that is the lower ball joint, and that one we did too. And you can see the boots are really good on there. So everything's pretty well clean and adjusted on this car as far as suspension. Like I said, I'm still getting a little clunk, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. But to cover the rest of the parts, here's your coils right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a little 4-cylinder. Under those coils are your spark plugs. You'll be just taking these little bolts off, and then there's a plug. This little cap comes off, your plugs are under there. Take your plugs off, pull those out. Your timing cover is right down in here. This is your timing cover. That guy, you can't get that off unless you take your valve cover off to be able to see your cam wheel and your belt, so you can somewhat be able to check the tension and see if there's anything going on. It was a pain. Had to remove the power steering pump. The alternator sits down there under that, down in that area. Then we had to take this engine mount off, which is right down here. You can see those two long bolts and that engine mount, to be able to get enough clearance down there, which we also had to take off this cover right here, this plastic cover. In order to get to the harmonic balancing wheel, we had to remove that in order to get to the crank wheel, to be able to see the timing marks on the bottom, and also to get to the tensioner, pulley, and spring. So there's an upper timing cover and a lower timing cover. The map sensor is right down there. As you can see, has a plug. I don't know if we're getting a good view, but there's a plug right there. It goes into the map sensor. That's the map sensor I replaced. The camshaft and the crankshaft sensor are going to be down here in the timing compartment along with the water pump. So if you're down there, change your water pump, and I would do your tensioner, pulley, and spring, because if you put a new belt and those go out later, you're going to be right back down there. And if you don't know what you're doing, they charge quite a bit of money to get down into these compartments. You're talking 3-4 hours, possibly 5 hours of labor. It can add up to hundreds quick. I also did the thermostat, which is right in the thermostat housing. It was leaking, so I took the hose off and I took a razor blade and got all the calcium buildup and crud off and wiped out the hose and put it back on with a clamp. And I put a new thermostat in there. I also changed all the coolant. You don't want to blow a head gasket. These cars are really sensitive when it comes to the cooling system. Transmission mount, as you can see, it's that guy right there. See if I can get a better view. I was trying to focus in on the box, but yeah, that's the transmission mount right down in there. And that's the guy I changed out. So I had to move this air box to get to that and then jack the engine up. Those are all the different things that I had to do and change out on this car to get it back into running condition. The end links on the rear are the same as the front sway bar links on the front. I mean, they're a little bit longer. Same concept, and I'm gonna pull a tire off to show you. And then I have the fuel pump. So let's end this video with showing you a couple YouTube videos that I was able to watch, along with some of the Amazon deals that I got on these parts. And then that'll give you guys an idea of what to look for when you're trying to get some more inexpensive parts. Okay guys, hopefully this will focus correctly. So as you can see right here, we have the map sensor, which we got for $9.99. They're about $60 to $75 at your local parts store. Here's the control arm kit, which was an 8-piece front lower control arm kit for the 01 to 05 Acura and Honda Civics. As you can see, the price is $94.99, and that comes with your front sway bar links. It comes with your tie rod ends, your lower ball joints, and your control arms, and it comes with the proper hardware to install those. Tools are going to be on you. One thing I do tend to do when I'm out here in my shop / garage, and when I say shop, I don't mean a mechanic shop, it's just where I do everything, but I set up my laptop and a table, and that way I can reference YouTube, because like I said, YouTube is one of the biggest things that I get on. And when I get on YouTube, I tend to be on there either listening to music or researching. You can see my history here. Some of the good sites is like 1A Auto. I found a lot of good information regarding my suspension on that. Let's see, Jim the car guy was another good video. Even this little young guy from Young Gearheads, he did the bushings. I watched his video and he did a great job. So I mean, there's tons of videos regarding subjects that you're looking to find information on for issues you may be having with your cars. You can see clunking noise. You know, that's where I got the idea for the bushings, and so there's millions of videos. I'll put some links to a few of these specific ones that helped me. Okay everyone, I just wanted to say thanks for watching this video. Like I try to make very clear, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just a self-thinker who has a lot of confidence, and I feel like I can get things done without having to always go to a professional. Some things not so much. If you take your time to Google some things and to go to YouTube, you'd be amazed on what you can find and the knowledge you can gain to be able to do some of these things yourself. Not only that, you can find parts for a fraction of the price and save on labor costs. That's what I did, and I will continue to do more videos when I go to do her fuel pump, or I do figure out what that slight clunking still is after doing the suspension. I'll do follow-up videos on that. Check out my Review It TV channel on YouTube. It's not dedicated to mechanics, it's everything. Anything that can be reviewed, you'll find on there. You can find some vacation videos and some other helpful videos that I've posted on there regarding information that may be valuable to you. With that being said, I appreciate you guys watching, and peace out.